Chico and the Man will not be presented this evening, and the Rockford Files will be seen 1 hour later than normal, so that we may bring you the following special program.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners. Welcome back, everybody. It's time again for Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Happy to spend an afternoon talking to a good buddy of mine, a man that really was instrumental in getting me into Chicago radio way back when. Well before even he and I worked together at The Score, the sports talk station in Chicago, at the old Loop, AM 1000. He was the main producer back then of Chet Kopek's show. And, I don't know what kind of conversation happened, but I would find myself on Chet's show and also when he would host. But it's one of my favorite people in radio, one of my best friends. It is the great Dan McNeil. Dan, good to see you. Welcome back.
It is good to be seen. It's even better to be heard. It's good to be anywhere when you're me. I kind of feel like Keith Richards at this point, right? I mean, if you're breathing and your feet land on the ground in the morning and you can pull yourself up, it's a good start, right?
Absolutely, man. I know you've been working on this project a long time. It is now out, covering your years, covering the Bears. I Bear Witness, a brand new book, and good looking cover, and funny stuff, Dan. I remember a lot of these stories, especially the years that you and I were together, and Mike Ditka was a talking head at The Score. And some of the fun that, but your story with the Bears starts earlier than that. Tell us when you started covering the Bears.
I started in '85, and that was a good time to start with the Bears. They had a pretty good season that year. In case you left the planet, the Bears of the Woof era, and I was an intern. It's not a very decorous position at WGN Radio, which had just acquired the rights. I should say reacquired the rights to Bears broadcast. Wayne Larrivee was in his first year in the Bears booth. William Perry was in his rookie season with the Bears. So it was quite a time to start my journey. And then from there, it was to the Hammond Times and Chet Kopek shortly after that in the late 80s, as you alluded to in the introduction, how we met years back. And then when The Score was born in 92, Mike Ditka helped launch the radio station in his final year as the Bears head coach. And that was one of my favorite stories to tell in I Bear Witness, was how Ditka helped make our radio station, because we were a rumor and we were operating on a very, questionable signal. The 820 frequency was a daytime only radio station. And that's what Diamond Broadcasting purchased to start The Score initially. And Ditka put us on the map because he lost his mind in that 5-11 season, and it benefited us enormously.
I remember well, Dan, and I know, and we've talked about it before. I'm really glad that you're back on, but I do like pointing out, as you said, we were a daytime only radio station, so we were off the air, especially in these winter hours, 4:30, 4:45. I forget the earliest we would be off the air. But the great thing was, man, Diamond creating The Score had no idea what they created, because the phone lines of Score people, listeners that wanted to get on the air hours after we were off the air, the phone lines are flashing. Everybody's flashing. They still want to talk. They have no idea we're off the air. And it's like, well, you guys must be doing something right. I mean, I'll say as a producer, I was, hunched over the screener calls and everything while Judd was operating the board. But that was a good time, man. And we and also, isn't it interesting, Dan, because now with all the online sports talkers that are out there, I kind of feel they must feel the same way that we did initially. The resentment from print media of like, who are these jerks? They don't have the training we do. What are they doing here in the press room, in the locker room, and all that stuff? And some guys were cool, and I don't even know on the Bears beat who were the cool guys. We don't have to out the guys that were jerks, but and certainly we would give them a little spotlight and have them on the score and stuff and give their opinions of what was happening with the Bears. But I honestly, and I've talked about it on the air when Bernstein had his flap with Barroom Sports earlier this year. I'm like, this reminds me of kind of the war that Print had with the score early on.
Yeah, that was kind of a silly little mishap. I didn't understand really what the fuss was all about. I get it that Dan didn't look real good, but the reaction from Barstool was just so over the top. It was surprising to me. As annoying as Bernsey was, it was harmless. He didn't mean anything by it. And I understood what he meant. I probably wouldn't have chosen to say it myself, but I understand when somebody is new to the fraternity and calls you by a colloquialism if you're not ready for that. I understand. I can relate to what set him off, but to react to it the way he did himself no favors. But everything that ensued afterward, it was kind of crazy, but all to do about nothing. I guess there were all kinds of crazy threats and Dan's family was nervous on his behalf for a little bit, but cooler heads prevailed and nothing happened. Fortunately, nothing happened because nothing should happen. It was silly.
Yeah, of course not. To Dan's credit, like a few days afterwards, he did a live remote in front of the Prudential building, and there was no extra security. And he's like, Johnny, nobody came to me and swore at me or spit at me or, hey, F you, Bernstein, as they're walking by or whatever. And I'm like, good, okay. And again, I heard about some of the other, the rough parts, but no, in the reality, it blew over. And again, that was months ago. So, but here, my God, Dan, this team now, real fast, we got to talk about how horrible this team is. And isn't it? It's so upsetting during the holidays when you watch like the Thanksgiving game and certainly last Thursday's game. Man, it's like these guys cannot get out of their own, literally cannot get out of their own way. How, you're much closer to the product than I am. I hate to call it the product, but what, tell me what you're seeing and what they're not doing, what could be adjusted now, or are they really beyond hope? It's false hope,
Well, adjusted now for what? I mean, for the rest of the season, not much. They're 4-12 with Green Bay left. Shaky, come on, they can't do anything now. They're going to hire a new head coach. That's the next item that is of critical importance, and whether they're going to get a head coach who will be willing to take the job with a general manager who's on the hot seat is a big topic of discussion right now, as it should be. And if your premier candidate really wants the job, and let's say for the sake of discussion, it's Ben Johnson, the Detroit Lions offensive coordinator. Let's say he wants the job and you're in his price range. You're going to meet his price range, which is probably going to be at least 10 million, maybe mid-teens even. That's what he'll be asking for. I don't know if the Bears will get to that, but all he's missing is, well, I don't want to roll dice on a personnel guy. If you hire me, Ryan may not be here, and maybe the next guy won't like me. Then maybe you have to make a move and you have to let the head coach come in with a GM. As goofy as that sounds, it's just so Bears-like to do it in a staggered fashion forever. They've never made the transition simultaneously where the GM authentically hired the head coach. They said this happened 2 years ago, but it didn't. Ryan Poles said he hired Matt Eberflus. The news conference to introduce the two of them, they were hired about 32 hours apart. There was no exhaustive search for a head coach. That was an arranged marriage, and Poles was very defensive when he was pressed on it at his initial news conference. So that's the next item of critical importance for the Bears, is getting the head coach to guide Caleb Williams. And now you have to be wondering, is Caleb Williams starting to sully that job based on recent performances? Because he's the one thing that saves the job from being undesirable. He keeps it from being a crummy job, yet he keeps playing so poorly. And Thursday night against Seattle was just dreadful. It was nice to have a day without the Bears. And in fact, extra football over the weekend. We had more games Saturday. We had games on this. More of them, the better. Hey, there's NFL football and it doesn't involve the Bears. I don't even want to watch it, but I'll just put it on, knowing the Shield is being represented and Chicago is not being dragged through the mud.
I'm with you, man. And also, I've certainly seen on it's so interesting, Dan. And again, I don't mean to keep bringing up social media, but it is really interesting because it is a component that wasn't there when I was in sports and covering sports. And it is fat. And I love the people leaving, the field that sell the team. Well, there's a little dose of reality, kids. Caskies aren't selling the team. Too much money. My God, the lousiest football team makes a boatload of money with revenue sharing with the owners, the TV packages that happen and stuff. And so I don't, despite as bad as things are, it's like it's not going to happen, kids. So get used to it. But beyond the front office issues, and of course the head coaching issue, does Caleb Williams need a better offensive line? It certainly seems so.
Yeah,
I mean,
their
he's not getting
offensive
sacked,
line is terrible. Their offensive line was bad. We knew that. We knew that going in. And sell the team, by the way. I get quite the kick out of that. We're the ones who enable them. We're the ones who line up by tens of thousands to show up to support the product. We are classic enablers. Why should the Bears sell the team? I mean, if you could sell feces without having to take away its malodorous stench.
Enjoy your lunch, everybody. Go on.
People are going to line up for it. Oh man, I don't care if McNeil and Suntress take the smell out of this product. I really like it as it is. I don't need it to be improved. I serve it as sloppy and as stinky as you can make it. And they're lined up around the block for it. Where is the pressure on this organization? It doesn't exist.
I hear you, buddy. Yeah, it's insane. And man, three quarterbacks in a row: Trubinsky, Fields, and now Caleb Williams. Man, it's like these guys can't get a break. And I wasn't the biggest Fields fan. I have nothing against him personally. It's just a guy that scrambled that much. It's like, okay, maybe the guy can't throw, and maybe the guy, maybe is going to be damaged goods with the way the NFL operates. It's like that's a quarterback that I don't know if he's going to have a long career with the amount of running that he had to do to score points. Trubinsky was a great quarterback that they shouldn't have gotten rid of at all. And yeah, Caleb Williams is a stallion, but it's the guy still needs guidance. And I was prepared for this season to not be a winning season, 5-12, something like that, because you got to learn the pro game. And Danny, I know squat about sports, as our dear friend Chet Kopic used to say, if he's not wearing boxing gloves, Shiggy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. and it's, that's fair. I understand. So I am really coming as a pedestrian point of view. But yeah, man, I mean, good Lord, you're right. I mean, obviously they need a head coach, and the poor guy needs a good pro offensive coordinator that can really help him adjust to the pro game. It shouldn't take that long, but obviously it's clearly not there right now, and that's very sad.
Yeah, we were expecting it to be so much different than this. You can hide a few things, individually that aren't good. It's tough to hide a really bad head coach and a bad offensive line. You might get away with one of them, but it's tough to survive both of them. And the head coach cost them games several times during the season. And of course, I decide, okay, I'm going to release this book in the middle of November. The Bears have never changed coaches in season. They wouldn't do that this year, would they? How in the world could that happen? Yeah, at least I got the so-so 2-2 start covered and took people up until the 5th game of the year when things did not start as rosy as expected, including the offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron, who was dismissed after 9 weeks. What a franchise, man. If they can screw it up, if it can be screwed it up, they'll find a way. There is no question about that. And I predicted they would be a playoff team. I should have known better than a girl like you. Yeah, I thought they would be the 3rd playoff team in the division. The division does get 3 playoff teams, just not Chicago. Everybody else in the division is so good right now. And what do all 3 have in common? Head coach who's a young offensive mind and a quarterback who is young and on the come and working in concert very harmoniously with his head coach.
I hear you, man. Mike Jones, good question, man. Here we go. Dan, can the Bears take inspiration from the Lions, who were a joke for decades, and a fan base who wanted the Fords to sell, or are there other problems that Detroit didn't have?
You know, the Lions have been a tortured franchise forever. And until last fall, it's funny that prior to last January, when they won 2 playoff games, they won 2 games at home. They beat the Rams and then they beat the Buccaneers before going to San Francisco. And they had the 49ers on the ropes and let them off the hook, Dennis Green. But they had not won but 1 playoff game since the Eisenhower administration. And that was right before the score signed on in January of 92. That's their 1 playoff win since 57 prior to last year. But, selling the Bears is not an impossibility as much as, people, and I understand why you want to dismiss the conversation if you choose to do so, Shaky, because some people think, well, it's not something that's going to happen. It might happen because Virginia McCaskey is not going to live forever. She's approaching 103, 104. And when she passes, it will come to a vote. There are 8 living McCaskey children. However, one of the 8 does not have a vote. He's not capacitated, does not have the faculties to get a vote. So they have an odd number of McCaskey heirs, 7 of them, where a vote might come to be. And I don't know how it would go. And it's not a pleasant thought because it sounds almost like you're rooting for it. And I'm not. I have no dog in this fight. I'm not necessarily a Bears fan. And even if I were, I wouldn't root for someone's passing. But people have likened it to what happened with the Blackhawks when Bill Wirtz passed away. And Rocky Wirtz, his son, took over. His son changed a lot of the things that his father did wrong.
That's
the
right.
Bears don't have that in the organization. They would have to, so because there've been plenty of McCaskies who've had their fingers all over this. That's why it's the mess it is.
I'm with you, man. No, I certainly remember the years that Mike was in charge of the team, and but I do think that the amount of family members that are still working for the organization is kind of again, whether it's good or bad. I mean, it just seems like it really is a family business still. And it is pleasantly surprising that Virginia McCaskey has gone the way of Rose Kennedy and reached past the centennial and is still with us. I don't know, man. I really don't know. And God, we all were so optimistic after last year's draft, having both picks and everything that we had that are top picks. We'll obviously have another big pick, depending on how things shake out. Certainly a top 10 pick come this April and everything. But again, it's the horses, but you need someone to guide the horses, man. And you need a couple of people to guide the horses. I'm not confident that they will make the right decisions, or as you say, for a person to walk into this job knowing that the general manager is, treading water, Yeah, it's a weird situation, and even in past frustrating Bears seasons, and as someone not only as someone who covered it, but as a fan, I mean, all those '70s teams that were not winning teams necessarily, but I mean, we were always took pride in the sense that Butkus and company and all these other guys, and Buffon and these guys in subsequent years would beat the hell out of a team. So yeah, you won, but you're limping off the field with your W and everything. And
those teams that beat the Bears knew they'd been to a fight, my friend. You look at what they did the next week. They didn't cover no spread after the Bears got them all bruised up, and dinged them, and Butkus bit guys and stuff.
Sad but true. Ditka is such an important part of that period, as you say, that even in his last losing season with 92 with us in the score. And you're right, it gave us credibility. It really, because that was the only place that Ditka was commenting day after the game. So everybody showed up. The TV cameras showed up, and certainly the fans. And of course, the fans were still drinking the Kool-Aid and, coach, what do we need to do, coach? And especially that first year, Dan, I'm so glad you sent me the chapter. When we got to Ditka's show, and you're going to describe it better, but not only do we have Mike Ditka, but unfortunately we also had to take his co-host that was really a glad-hander and a soft-soaper in Mike Pyle. And I'll name names because it's fair. It's out there. It's on the record and everything. And, man, I mean, tell us what it was like getting that Ditka show and what it was like trying to be an honest journalist and go, hey, let's talk about the problems and what are you going to do to solve them and everything. And what the experience was like to not only deal with Ditka, but a real kind of cement wall with Mike Pyle.
Yeah, Mike had been Ditka's partner in crime at WGN Radio, which had the rights to his show forever. And it was a shocker. The Score pulled it away from GN when it did in 92. That was unexpected. And it was very Ditka-like to do that to the Bears because they didn't want their coach's show to be on anything other than the flagship, which they knew was safe. And they didn't know what they were getting with the Score. Mike Pyle was the lapdog. He was Ditka's protector and would not let any callers try to bully Ditka at any point during their association, going way back before when the Score got the show. But Ditka took to North and he took to Jiggets. And he tolerated Tom Scher, and he absolutely loathed me, and he loathed Terry Boers even more, my partner at the time in 92. And Terry was hosting the day Ditka unleashed Who You Crappin', which became a segment, a bit on the radio station for 20-plus years. And that would be Terry's last show. He didn't want to deal with Ditka anymore. I think he felt uncomfortable. I think he felt threatened in the environment at that restaurant out on Bryn Mawr too. Maybe some of the guys in the Coogee sweaters with the unibrows, and the bad costume jewelry threatened him or something. Diana Ditka once called Terry Boers a cocksucker. That was before the Score even was on the air. Yeah, that's so maybe Terry felt threatened, but Terry pulled out after I think 2 shows. So which moved everybody else up 1 week in the rotation. We all alternated. North would do it one Tuesday, I'd get it the next, Jiggets the next, Scher the following, and then when Terry pulled out, there's only 4 of us instead of a 5-man rotation, or 5 instead of a 6 because Scher still wanted to do it. And Ditka tolerated Jerry, but Ditka used me as a punching bag. And when he saw I wasn't gonna, lie down in the corner and cower, he kind of laid off. But several times over the course of that season, and I probably only hosted four shows at the most, I would think, if I'm, my math isn't good. You have 17-week season divided by 5 hosts. How many shots you going to get to do it? 4 at the most, probably. So he had a shot for me about not knowing Vince Tobin, and Greg Landry wouldn't know you and wouldn't like you if he knew you. And the next week it was he fired on Ed O'Bradovich, and that was the one that got us so much recognition too, is when he said he didn't know Ed O'Bradovich. I don't know OB. And I said, the guy who presented you at the Hall of Fame in Canton, biggest mistake I ever made. Oh, was that good stuff? And Mike North and I were in a bar in the western suburbs that Monday night for a Monday Night Football appearance, watching it on Channel 5's news at the time. Gian Greco is on Channel 5, and we're getting pub on Channel 5, and high fives all around. It probably shouldn't have driven home that night, but those were some fond early memories of the score. Sorry, I'm babbling.
No, I love it. I truly, because again, it was colorful radio, and it was candid radio. And man, I forgot that Terry only did 2 shows because, of course, their exchange. Do you still have the fire, coach, or whatever? Well, you were the guy that was complaining I didn't have the fire. So who you crapping? And that's where, of course, the great "Who You Crapping" segment came from. My one of my regular friend. Well, he's a regular friend. He's a regular listener as well. My buddy Dave Marin is asking a couple questions there. He wants to know, was the beginning of the decline when the big 3, Vicini, Tobin, and Ditka, were broken up? Was that the beginning of the decline for the team?
I think you could. I think Jerry Venisi, while a Ditka ally, I think that took away a lot of Ditka's spirit. When they fired Venisi after the 87 season, Jerry was the general manager, even though he was more of the general manager in terms of how he handled contracts. It was still Jim Finks and Bill Tobin who put together the talent for those teams, but Venisi was a Ditka ally. They were confidants, and it took something out of Mike, I thought, and those who were close to Mike thought, when Jerry was let go. And it was only a few more years before Mike was fired following the 92 season. And Bill Tobin didn't even stick around for the first full year of Dave Wanstead. He took his projector and went home, not wanting to help Wanstead any further than the draft. And that was a surprise to Dave because they were going to do personnel in concert. I think Bill Tobin was mad that his little brother Vince didn't get the opportunity to be Ditka's successor, and he didn't like the Dallas system that Wanstead was going to deploy, and that is the GM and the head coach will collaborate on the draft. Tobin was more old school. Coaches coach, scouts do the drafting. Dave wasn't going to have that. He wanted to collaborate, but Bill Tobin wasn't having it. He left.
I got to be honest, Dan. In those years of Wanstead coaching the Bears, never liked the guy. The more stories I heard off the air and from teammates, Bears themselves, and how he treated certain guys. One of our good friends, Ron Rivera, I will say that, because nothing frustrated me more than after Ron was playing and really wanted to coach and basically begged Wanstead, hey, use me. Please use me. Thank God Andy Reid recognized what Ron Rivera could bring as an assistant coach back then. His career in coaching speaks for itself. But and it really drives me nuts, and I don't watch his coverage now, Wanstead, as a pundit out there talking about the Bears. And it's like, man, that was just the biggest amount of mistakes that I could not stand the guy. And I still, to this day, I don't know him personally, but it just, he was two-faced, and it really pissed me off.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's typical of a lot of coaches or not, but just being in front of it as we were, it's just, and I'm speaking from my own opinion. If you have a different opinion on Wanstead, feel free. But,
Well, I understand why people were frustrated by the results of his tenure in 6 years. Not a whole lot to show. Only one playoff appearance. They did win one playoff game in his third year. I'm sorry, his second year, 93. Or wait a minute. 94. The 94 season, they won on January 1. They won on New Year's Day of 95. I remember Doug Buffon and I in the cafeteria that morning, little buddy. I got to wait for the Bears to win this thing, kid. Dave Wanstead was the one who gave Ron Rivera his first coaching opportunity in '97.
Oh, excuse me.
The Bears. That's okay. Maybe he wanted to get on the staff earlier than he did and didn't get an opportunity. But yeah, Wanstead hired Rivera in '97. Chico was considering a career in broadcasting. You might remember him bouncing around the hallways at the Score now and again, hosting now and again.
Oh yeah,
because coaching didn't happen right out of the chute for him. It was a couple years after his career before he finally put on the silly bike shorts.
Well, I'm glad you cleared that up. I appreciate that. I'm just so happy for Ron. I really am. And my God, especially surviving his cancer and everything. I hope his health is doing better. But yeah, great guy, sweetheart of a guy. And Dan, who are the coaches that got away that we probably should have hung on to? Are there any that since like from Ditka to now?
Everybody on the '85 team would tell you Buddy Ryan. In fact, if there's something that surprised me about the attitudes of ex-Bears when interviewing the 85ers for this book is how hot they still are over Ditka winning that power struggle over Buddy Ryan. They think, now I'm not in agreement with them, but representing what some of the guys on the defense, they think that team would have won several more Super Bowls if it would have been Ditka who left and Buddy Ryan who would have been retained and been the head coach. And they also believe that Mike Tomczak would have been enough of an answer, that they didn't need Doug Flutie. These guys get it in their heads over the years, and there's no talking them out of this. I ran into Otis Wilson as recently as September, and we had Tomczak. We didn't need Doug Flutie. And I said, Otis, do you remember? Forget the winning percentage. Do you remember how average Mike Tomczak? Look, I've known Mike since we were teenagers. We went to camp together, for crying out loud. I rooted for the guy to win, but Mike Tomczak was a backup. Mike Tomczak was not. And I'm not saying Doug Flutie was great either, but these guys have such an opinion on Tzak that is so disproportionately inaccurate. It's just bad. And that's what surprised me about this group, that they still are so hot at Ditka. Richard Dent and Otis Wilson as much as anybody.
Interesting. Wow, very interesting. Dave Marin throws out a name, and certainly a name that's still out there. I found Harbaugh to be a vapid dud. Man, I imagine that was a pipe dream of Jim Harbaugh ever coming back to this team in a coaching capacity, which is a shame because obviously I think he's done quite well for himself in the coaching world. So I would have liked to have seen it, but I don't know, man. But yeah, like, you know, again, the Lovie Smiths, the John Foxes, et cetera, some of these other more recent post 2000 coaches and stuff. No, you know, that they weren't the solution, and probably even with better horses probably wouldn't have been the solution.
We're missing only Mark Trestman. I think we've hit everybody but Mark Trestman. Let's tee him up. Have we teed up Matt Nagy by name yet? Let's put
Nagy,
him
very nice,
on the pommel horse, as we used to say, and the great Matt Eberflus. Oh my goodness. It has been a carnival of suck, hasn't it? With that that outfit just rolls out one mistake after the next, and why would we think it will change? Why? Because law of averages? And that's kind of how I was figuring why they, Caleb Williams can't miss. They can't be wrong again, can they? They have to get one of these right. Well, maybe he's only been intercepted 6 times this year, but he's also the 4th most sacked quarterback in NFL history. And you know what? You earn that. That's not all on the O-line. The quarterback earns that too, not getting rid of the hoochie, which is exactly what we said about Justin Fields, his predecessor.
Fair enough. Absolutely fair enough. No, again, we've seen flashes of greatness in Caleb Williams, and I'll say greatness. But you're right. No, but it's I don't know. Again, for me, it was a learning curve. And like I said, I really wasn't expecting much, even with the top picks. I'm forgetting the ninth pick or whatever that they had beyond Caleb Williams. Who was the other first round top pick?
Rome Odunze.
Of course.
Yeah, the wide receiver who's been. Yeah, we were gonna write songs about him too. Rome, he's a Dunze. Roam around the world. He's been their third best guy, and no insult that DJ Moore has been better, but Odunze has not really been very good. He's made a couple of big plays, but man, he's tailed off. He's not been impressive. I've not been, for the ninth pick in the first round, not overwhelmed by what I've seen from Rome if you want to.
Dave used to write for Buffon's Bear Report, and he said, I covered home games between 86 and 2001. I found the offensive linemen were always the most learned men in the game, particularly Jim Covert, Hilgenberg, Heck, Dave Dewerson was extremely quotable. Which players were genuine in your time on the beat that you can get, I guess, an honest answer from and insight?
He mentioned a bunch of them right there. Dave, those are good guys to talk to. All the offensive linemen and defensive linemen were my guys. Those for some reason, I found those guys more relatable. And Dave Dewar
said like Ditka, relatable.
Relatable.
Thank you.
Pleasure, boo. Make this interview nice and pleasurable.
That's the blue collar part of the team, man. I mean, the offensive and defensive line, man. They're the lunch pail guys, absolutely.
Right. The guys who roll up their sleeves and go to work, my friend. And the late Dave Dewerson, we became friendly well after his career. I don't want to say friends, but friendly and very friendly. He was a contributor to my shows on both The Score and ESPN 1000 and participated in several Mac Yurko and Harry autism charity golf outings and was always very, very good with listeners and very good with us. Always fun to be around. And when I saw concussion, I wept. It really took my breath away. What chronic traumatic encephalopathy does to render people a shell of themselves, and it's horrible.
Dan, when Ali died, a lot of my sports radio friends asked me to come on and comment, and I had been, active in about 6 or 7 years as far as sports radio, but I kept saying, I'm like, I know it's against Ali's religion, but I really wish his family would consent to an autopsy to see if Ali had CTE as well, because I believe that was the cause of his condition. A friend of mine, her father was a heart specialist at Northwestern University here in Chicago. And I remember during the 84 Olympics watching boxing at his house. And he's like, you like boxing, don't you, John? I said, yeah. He goes, well, I've seen CAT scans of Muhammad Ali's head trauma. And he said, if you knew what I knew, you probably wouldn't be a fan of the sport anymore. And then as we learned more and more about CTE, it's like, yeah. Oof. But him and I'm forgetting some of the other big names outside of the Bears and stuff that clearly had it bad. And I know there's one guy that the guy who played wasn't it Munoz? Didn't Munoz have CTE? Or if not Munoz, somebody else? Wasn't Munoz the big guy in the right stuff? Who was the big football player in the right stuff?
Anthony Munoz. No, he's doing quite well in life. Actually,
thank God.
He's doing okay. God. Yeah,
so
you might be thinking of Andre Waters of the Philadelphia Eagles. There were several Pittsburgh Steelers. Justin Strelzik is one of them. Mike Webster. Mike Webster is considered the first CTE discovery. And
was he the Steeler, Dan?
Yes, he played center for the Steelers.
Yes,
and he wound up. I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna. You continue. Excuse me. I was gonna say
he was homeless.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say.
He was the butt of jokes because people thought it was just his recklessness. And
yes,
it's when I first heard of athletes having depression related to CTE, my first thought was, well, there's a difference between depression and sadness. Sadness is probably what they mean because, depression is clinical. Depression, there's nothing you can do about it if it's clinical.
Right.
Sadness is you get over those things and you have to find. But when the depression is your brain, and man, it's just the science of it is just so crazy, and it's terrifying that you cannot do anything. You can't diagnose it until a person has passed.
Yeah. No, it's and really, Dan, again, as we learn more and more medically about the injuries of football and what it can do with head trauma. Al Toon, I remember from the Jets having to retire early because of his headaches, and some of the greats as they were getting older. I remember when John Mackey would unfortunately show up. Good Lord, even, God, Dan, for the Bears All-Century team. I hate to talk about the depressing stuff, and we'll get to some of the fun stuff that's in the book. But I worked at BBM News, and Jeff Joniak, the voice of the Bears, obviously was there and stuff. And it was as they were prepping for the Bears convention for the All-Century team. And a friend is like, "Hey, how's Gale Sayers doing?" I'm like, I don't know. So I asked Joniak, and it's like, yeah, Gale's not doing well. And I just remember him on stage not knowing where he was. And I mean, that's not head trauma. I don't even know poor Gale's had Alzheimer's. I don't think it was from his football years. I honestly don't know. But Gale was incredibly good to me when he was the analyst that followed Peyton on the score. And really, I ironically, in a completely non-sports way, I worked at the bank that he and Mrs. Sayers had their accounts at, Artie Sayers. And she remembered me, and she's like, "Gail, do you remember John? John used to work at the bank and everything that we still have our accounts at." And after that, he was, every time he would come over to watch football at North's house, he would pull me to the side, and he'd be like, "How's the station treating you?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay, man." And he goes, "Well, if you need help with anything, you let me know, and I'll put in a word for you." I'm like, Jesus Christ, Gale Sayers wants to help me out. My God,
nice.
That's incredible. And good Lord, Dougie was such a good friend. I mean, these guys, they meant so much to me. It's funny when Marin mentioned Covert. Covert was like my favorite 85 guy because we would talk old movies. And he knew that I loved old movies. And he and I would talk about the old movies we'd watch on Turner Classic Movies and stuff like that and laugh about stuff, which, again, I'm like, I can't believe Jimbo Covert, is happy to see me and wants to talk BS with me and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, Jimbo was a score guy in the early days. I remember him hiring Buffalo Grove Dave to paint his house in Lake Forest. So he was co-hosted with me in the bunker, and he was talking about having to hire a painter, and Dave called, and he said, "Mac, tell it's like we're on the air. It's like hooking these people up, bringing men to other men," as Terry said. So Covert got a deal from a score listener. And Hilgy's been a buddy since the days at the Loop as well. But yeah, Gale was nice to me. I didn't get to know Gale Sayers well. I liked what I knew. He was very bitter, and I understand why he would be bitter. He worked for an organization that didn't want to pay him, that probably didn't want to give him the best medical treatment possible. The Bears were notorious for having a horrible medical department, and it was, not to his advantage to have the surgeries he had when he had them because the technology wasn't very good. And then shortly after he retired, Walter Payton arrived, and Chicago fell in love with Walter Payton. So that was a bitter pill for Gale to swallow, as it was for Walter when Michael Jordan inherited the throne from him after his career concluded. Now, Walter didn't hold that against MJ, but I'm sure the Bulls' popularity and global success, whether he knew it or not, haunted Peyton.
That's fair. Give me some great stories, if you don't mind, because, again, we want to sell books for you. Bear Down Everywhere. I Bear Witness. I beg your pardon. I Bear Witness, of course, the title of Dan's new book. And great memories of covering the Bears. Give me a funny story about the Bears that's in the book.
The Fog Bowl is something that is remembered for its oddness in that Fogg actually it was like NFL Twilight Zone. And if you get a chance to, since you're now watching the Bears actually play playoff games this coming January, you can watch the Fogg Bowl because you'll have idle time as they will. And I did this last year. I watched a couple of different documentaries on the Fogg Bowl to refresh my memory.
Which year was that, Dan?
It was New Year's Eve of '88. The Bears had just gone 12-4, and they had home field against the Eagles, and it was Buddy Ryan's Eagles. Buddy was in his third year. He and Ditka already had faced off once in a regular season grudge match, but this was the playoffs, and Buddy Ryan made his presence felt right out of the chute. He has the Eagles bus drivers circle Soldier Field 3 times honking their horns. Now, that's usually reserved for a high school football team when they're on the road, but that's what Buddy did. It was a cool day, but it was a cloudless Saturday morning. And then shortly before 11 o'clock, there was some clouds started to accrue, and the way the fog swirled in over the south end, nobody remembers how awful the game was, and the NFL should have stopped it. The NFL left it in the hands of Mike Ditka and Buddy Ryan. Jim Tunney, who just passed, by the way, the referee, just passed last week, asked Ditka and asked Ryan, what do you want to do? Ryan was just bitching about the refereeing. He says, call them both, call penalties on both sides in the second half, will you? I'm fine with the conditions. They never should have allowed the game to continue because it was unsafe, even though the players didn't admit to it being unsafe, but they were not sure of themselves. Most of the big plays were on turnovers. It was a very clunky game. It was a very poorly played game by both teams, and that's what's lost in the shuffle. People remember the oddness and how there was no visibility, but they don't remember how bad the game was as a result of it, and the fact the NFL never should have allowed it to continue the way it did. They should have stopped it at halftime until the fog subsided.
Crazy. Absolutely crazy. I'm glad you mentioned Hilge, and again, your years with Yurkovich as well, co-hosting and stuff. So who are some other great Bears that were good friends and are good friends of yours?
Not necessarily a friend, but a good source is Brian Urlacher. Of the 21st century stars in Chicago, he's the only guy to whom I really hitched my wagon with any degree of consistency. Early on in his career, Patrick Kane and I had something going, but he had to go clock a cab driver in Buffalo, and then the Hawks kept him hermetically sealed from all of us. Third or fourth year of his career, from then on out, he was off limits. You couldn't get near him. But Urlacher's a guy who I think has become very comfortable in his own skin. He doesn't want people to hate him for voting for Trump, but he's okay with you if you do. He's very content to let you know that he didn't participate in the insurrection. I think it's kind of.
Did he really?
He didn't participate.
Okay, I was going to say, Jesus Christ.
No, I asked him that as a joke. I said, just for the record, since some friends of mine are going to watch this podcast, on YouTube, just for the record, you were not one of the guys over the wall, were you? You did not participate? Because no, I was not.
God bless him. All right, very good.
Yeah, I like Brian. I think Brian's one of the greatest players in franchise history, and I've enjoyed his candor, and he seems to be very comfortable in his own skin, and he's not as bitter as I thought he would be, because he's got a lot of red ass. I mean, when he has a thing for you, it burns in him, and but I think he's let a lot of those things go over the years. And he could have held a grudge for a lot longer with the Bears, but he hasn't. He's let some things go because they treated him like crap at the end, like they did Butkus, Sayers, in their minds, Ditka in his mind, Peyton in his mind, McMahon in his mind, and on and on and on. And that is one of the consistent themes of I Bear Witness, is the McCaskey family always has said they're going to do this, and then they do that. We will reward our own when we capture the championship. And then they won the championship. And Wilbur Marshall was a free agent, Plan B free agent signee of the Washington Redskins at the time in 1988, and a lot of people believed it deteriorated from there.
Mike wants to know if you have any good Jim Harbaugh stories. I know some Jim Harbaugh stories that don't involve score people that I heard over the years and stuff. But yeah, any good Harbaugh stories?
This didn't make the book because it's more of a personal story that I want to tell in my radio autobiography, and will and have, as a matter of fact, which is not published yet. It'll be out in the spring, not sure just when, but
cool.
Something Jim did, an appearance I did with him in 1989, I thought was really cool. And he was an odd guy and remains an odd guy. I like him, but I don't necessarily trust him. He's one of those guys you have to read when he walks in the room. You've got to make sure you know what his mood. And I used to be one of those guys. When I recognized that, I became better at being human. I was doing an appearance at Oak Lawn, and a guy asked him to sign a football for his grandson who was in a local hospital. And he said, "What's wrong?" He said he had his appendix removed. And he said, "Well, where's the hospital?" He's nearby. He says, "Call him and see if we can run it by." He went by the hospital at 11 o'clock at night. The hospital cleared him to come after hours because a member of Jim Harbaugh wanted to drop off. He wanted to get away from the bar scene, and he would have rather just spent time, making an 11-year-old kid's night. So he showed up at the hospital with an autographed football for a kid. So that's a Jim Harbaugh story. Now there can be times when Jim Harbaugh can be the exact opposite of that too. That's what makes him human.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And again, I would have loved to have seen him come back home and coach a Bears team. I think it would have been a great story. And I think I think he's proven his talent as a coach in all these seasons that he has been coaching and everything. So. No, that's great. So, Dan, you're, like you said, I'm so glad to hear that the second book about your radio career is coming up in the spring. That's wonderful to hear. Is there a title? Is it Dangerous? I know you had told me before that.
I'm leaning on Me and the Boys.
Oh, nice.
Excellent. And the Boys. Little Dave Edmunds action, I think.
Sure.
Is that who sings that?
I think so. I think so.
Dave Edmunds. Yeah.
Of course, Thin Lizzy, the boys are back in town, yes. and the Bus Boys of the infamous Eddie Murphy movie, 48 Hours. Both were boys are back in town.
Love me 48 Hours.
Well, I don't know if I make the book or not, Danny, but I'm happy to have been one of those boys. And really, our friendship has always been a lot.
Well, I think if you make the Bears book, you definitely will make the radio book. What do you think?
It's a good times, man.
Yeah.
It really meant a lot. And it's funny because Cher was just interviewed by a good friend of mine, Margaret Larkin, who does a podcast called Radio Girl, and she interviews a lot of Chicago people. Actually, I should put her in touch with you because you'd be a good interview for her to talk about your career. But yeah, she's like, "Did you ever work with Tom Cher?" I'm like, "Let me tell you about me and Tom Cher." And when I went for the job, you were totally like, well, I honestly, I don't even know, Danny, what your opinion of me was beyond being the boxing guy from Boxing Illustrated and stuff when I wanted to be at the Score and get out of my 9-to-5 banking job and get back to radio and stuff. And I mean, I don't know what I convinced of you that, hey, take a chance on this guy as a producer. Yeah, I don't know. Can you forgive the personal question? But yeah, do you remember whatever?
Yeah, I
about
wanted a radio guy. I wanted people who had radio skills. I can't, people who understand the medium. It's just not rip and read. This is not what we're doing here. We're combining FM with AM here in our little world of talk,
yes.
And that's something that the Loop taught me how to do. And you had FM, radio experience and with your movies and music knowledge. And it's why a guy like Ron Gleason is, just makes me shake my head sometimes. And I think of how I had to fight him on things that he didn't understand simple things. And he doesn't know that much. He doesn't have to know that much about sports. He's the producer. He's making the sound. It doesn't matter. So I had to go to the mat for guys like you with goofs like Gleason to explain to him the job that he's hiring somebody for.
Well, we were more of a personality station. Again, guys like Gleason and Tom Scher came from button-down news.
Yep.
And weren't ready for the wise ass corner bar attitude that the Score brought from day one. And man, it was great to be a part of it. And I'm glad that people like you were like, no. We need more funny. We need more character beyond what the news wires are spitting out and stuff. And Cher, unfortunately, was in that camp as well. And God, I remember chapter and verse of that horrible interview I had with him, and I came out. And you're like, how'd it go? And I'm like, horrible. And thank God Gleason at least, put me on the standby. And when the hours expanded in the spring, I started, working on the weekends. And, you couldn't contain me, man. I had to do my voices and my characters. And you and I didn't work much on the weekends, but obviously we had the Copic connection. And when you would host for Chet on the weekends before you were at the Score full, as a full host and everything. It meant a lot that on pay-per-view boxing nights, you would have me on for 5 minutes and we'd talk about that night's fight, things like that. But thank God, again, Hanley and Boers thought I was silly and funny and, whatever. And thank God when the opening came up on your show to be there with Judd Surratt, now the great voice of the Boston Bruins and everything in NHL hockey. But the four of us, man, it was a party every day. And really, I only remember one day you being mad at me, and I only remember one day Terry Boers being mad at me. And other than that, we pretty much had a great time for those years that we worked together.
I'm sure there was more than one day, but it was the kind of I don't know if it's a mad is I don't know what that
means. Situational. Yeah, it was situational.
Yeah, don't excuse me.
Don't excuse me. Yes.
Don't excuse
God bless you.
Don't excuse me.
And Terry was just really like there was something going on personal, and I don't really remember what it was, but like he was mad. Just do your job, and I'm like, all right, whatever. And at the end of the day, he's like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, man. And he hugged me, and he's like, I'm sorry, buddy. And I'm like, dude, whatever's bothering you, I go, we're on your side, please. Well, my favorite memory, of course, is when man, from day one, you wanted Mickey Rourke on the Score. So because again, you and I both. Pope of Greenwich Village, Diner, all his great movies, man. We were such fans. And Judd finally gets, and I know he had been working that 4 months to get Mickey on.
And the program director wanted to know why we wanted him on. He's Mickey freaking Rourke. Earth to you. Hello. Do you live on this planet? He was one of the hottest actors in the world 10 years earlier. Maybe not even that long.
Not even that long.
What was 9.5 weeks? Like 85, 86?
Yeah, it was when I was in college. So, yeah, mid-'80s. Yeah.
So this is 92. Hollywood has blackballed him. 92 or 93 when we got him on.
Yeah, 93 because I was sitting in the chair that day. Yeah.
Jeez.
Running the board. Yeah.
And we had to sell Gleason on the idea that he's doing these club fights. He's fighting. He's training to be a club fighter since Hollywood won't have him. And fighting is what truly made him happy anyway, as I've learned in the years since. Do you see, there was a good interview. I saw a good interview he did not long ago. I'm sorry.
I'll have to find it. No, I'd love to see it because, as you know, I'm a big boxing guy and was.
Yeah, but he talks about how that truly gave him peace, more so than acting. Fighting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, that day, if people don't know, God, he. I know I sent you an MP3. I hope you still have it. Where he was, because it's buried somewhere in my crap in my apartment, but. He was starting to swear, and we've got as most radio and television happens, there's a 7-second delay, but we weren't taught how to properly use the dump button to get to live, and actually, if you need to still edit after hitting a dump button. Gleason kind of kept that knowledge away from us, from me and Judd, and really from the rest of the producers. And he wouldn't stop swearing. And at first, I was like a sniper on the beach, picking off guys as they were coming out of the bushes and nailing them. So, all right, got that one, got that one, got that one. And then because we were told the delay wouldn't reset for 90 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember at one point, I hit the button, and Judd behind me goes, okay, our pants are down. So whatever happens, we're screwed.
Right.
If he should swear. And he kept swearing. And I remember Gleason walking into our studio and saw you across the glass and gave the get him off the air sign. And you're like, no way, man. And I know you'd been waiting for 2 years to talk to the guy. And then he and I got called to the carpet to Dan Lee and to Seth Mason, the owner of the station and the general manager. All right, what happened? And we're like, well, and Judd and I are like, hey, man, we take our orders from the host, man. We work for these guys. And, there's no way in hell we were going to take him off the air. Sorry. And it's like, why didn't you have the chief engineer was there. It's like, why didn't you hit the dump? And we're like, well, we were told that the dump doesn't work and it takes 90 seconds. And he's like, no, after 10 seconds, you've got a full second of delay because it's slow. It goes from being 7-second delay. I'm using my hands for the radio audience or the audio audience. You hit the button. Now you're live. But slowly within that 90 seconds, that delay expands. And you can even tell after somebody does it. It almost sounds like somebody's on too much NyQuil. And it's like, well, the Bears are going to. And so Mark Nielsen, the engineer, is like, no, you could have after 10 seconds, if you got fast hands, which I did, you could hit the button. And we're like, and it's like, Gleason's like, yeah, I didn't tell them that. And then all the focus went to Gleason. And it's like, all right, guys, you're excused. I'm sure they were thinking about firing us. I don't know, because there were certainly plenty of part-timers that they could have thrown in there, and stuff. And the fault lay on Gleason. That, and of course, as you remember, they were all afraid of the internet being in the studio. All you guys are going to do is sit and look at porn all day. And I forget what news stories broke that we had to, go down the hall to get the information and print it out.
The OJ verdict.
Maybe
probably the OJ verdict.
Certainly around that era. But yeah, man. And then finally, all right, we'll put the internet in the studio. That, and as you said, the bunker. I always love talking about, folks. We had a studio that could barely fit 2 people. God forbid there were 3 people in the performance studio, and it was like a submarine. Or a very small cockpit. I mean, and I was sidekicked for Van Leer and Buffon. So I'm there with a bull and a bear and these giant athletes and stuff. And I'm a little mailbox of a fire plug fat ass. And the 3 of us, so we're like, yeah, how you doing? All right, what do you think of the team? I don't know. What do you think of
it? Hey, you have to move your shoulders.
Yeah, God forbid you had to pick your nose because you get an elbow. The other guy would get an elbow in the face, basically. And that fantastic studio that they built across the street the score will be there. And I don't know what technically didn't work, but the owners had a barter station as well. Foreign language, the Ukrainian hour followed by the Israeli hour, whatever. And there was such a big performance studio. They had an upright piano in the studio. And I remember the first time I went in there, and I think Northwest it's like, Jesus, they got a piano in this goddamn thing. Look at where we are. We're in the cockpit. My God, this sucks, man. Roy Bellavia and the polka hour were very comfortable in this giant, studio. They could have put couches in there, for God's sake. I love that shit, man.
Bellavia.
It was crazy, man.
It was the Wild West of radio. Belmont Avenue, 4949 West Belmont, 606 Dick Tidrow, 4-1.
That's indeed right. Dick Tidrow, the pitcher, the Cub pitcher. Absolutely, man. Mm-hmm. Hilarious. No, man, I'm telling you that really, though, and also the poor XRT people, because, they're having their nice little hangout and stuff, these former hippies, and just, hey, man, everything's cool. And, man, we kick open the door, and it's like, all right, the jerks are here. Move out of the way. Out of the way,
Yeah,
jerks.
they really got the short end of the straw on that one. It's not only that was their space encroached upon, their space was encroached upon by people who hadn't been cleansed in their minds. It's like these are the unwashed.
Literally.
Who are these people? North and McNeil and all these clowns, all these guys with ill-fitting clothes and bad skin and eating
A lot of
greasy
Zubas.
food. Yes. Yes. Shaky, always good catching up with you. Thanks for including me. And again, I know the name of the podcast is Word Balloon, but I really think, even though it doesn't fit on a billboard as nice as Word Balloon, which is so tight, but I'm Shaky and that's bullshit, is worth considering. I think you should
Well,
give that consideration.
Longtime viewers and listeners know that is kind of the subtitle, because I certainly air my grievances with the nerd world on this very show. So I do appreciate that. Yeah, we can wrap, buddy. It's I Bear Witnesses, this fantastic book by Dan McNeil. And thankfully, again, to mollify the bad feelings that we're having about the current Bears season, I encourage you to check out this fantastic book, because there's a lot of great stories in there, and Dan's coverage of the Bears speaks for itself. It continues, and man, subsequently this spring, I look forward to the radio biography book of yours, autobiography, and yeah, man, we could certainly go down memory lane more if you're willing.
I look forward to that. Have thoughts. We'll chat. We'll travel. We'll yak it up, especially when it comes to the early days of radio, because that, I've been lucky enough to be a part of 3 different radio things that were special. And every time I knew it was special. The Loop, the first 5 years at the Score, and the last 5 years of Mac Yurko and Harry. Those 3 stretches, I mean, it's like 3 completely diametrically opposed organizations from every aspect.
Yeah.
There's the similarity of 2 sports stations being involved, but also part of combos. It's like winning a championship for the Yankees, the Canadians, and I don't know, the Dallas Cowboys.
I'm with you. No, absolutely, man. And again, you're a survivor. Is there an online, like, are you doing a podcast now? I know you were doing, and I don't know if you still are.
Yeah.
In fact,
that's why I got to scoot out now, because
feel free, buddy.
Yeah, Ricky Waters is going to be joining me in just a little bit. We're going to talk about running backs. It's the Danny Mac Bet Rivers podcast. I do a couple of interviews a week.
Excellent. I'm glad that Bet Rivers was smart enough to pick you up and everything, and get you involved. So is that a pre-recorded? Is that a pre-recorded thing, or okay, cool, excellent. No, Dan, I'm glad, and that's excellent, man, because your voice is important, and it's been an important part of Chicago sports. And again, thank you for helping me when I needed it most, and getting me to jump from Bloomington, Illinois, to Chicago radio, and spending 30 years in Chicago radio. It means a lot, and I don't think I would have had the platforms that I have now if it weren't for guys like you helping me out when I needed it. So thank you.
Stop. Thank you for saying that, but you earned every break you got, and you do great work, man. So thank you.
Thanks, buddy. And Jeremy in the comments was very sweet and said, hey, great show. And again, this is the nerds. They always say, I don't even watch sports ball, but this has been a very entertaining show. So no, I appreciate it, Jeremy. I'm glad. And I knew my listeners would always appreciate it when Dan and I get together, and same with Mike North and stuff. No, we got a lot to talk about, and radio is fascinating, and sadly, as it goes through its transition, being alongside the digital product that's happening now, it's interesting. As the Chinese used to say, "You live in interesting times." We're doing it, and it's fun to kind of observe what's happening and talk to my friends that are also in a common reference that can appreciate what's going on. So, thank you. Thanks everybody for watching and listening. Until next time, everybody stay safe. Stay happy, stay healthy.